Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Practically Green, a series of 4 programs to tell you or help you with the establishment of the city's pesticide bylaw. My name is Paul Wilson and I will be host of the 4 programs, and I hope you'll join us for all 4. Peterborough is now one of 10 municipalities across Ontario that has a pesticide bylaw. The bylaw came into being through the work of a citizens committee which met for some 2 years and really came up with somewhat of a compromise position. City Council, in their wisdom, decided on a firmer approach. On March the 1st, 2006, a pesticide bylaw will come into effect. The program will be shown 2 in the fall and 2 in the spring, and they hopefully will give you a detailed analysis of how to live with a green natural lawn in the workings of the pesticide bylaw.
The pesticide bylaw comes into effect in the city of Peterborough on March the 1st, 2006. The bylaw stipulates that the application or use of a pesticide is prohibited within the boundaries of the city of Peterborough.
Our first guest on Practically Green is the Assistant City Solicitor, Alan Barber. Alan, you wrote the bylaw, the pesticide bylaw. What is its purpose?
The purpose of the bylaw is to prohibit the use of non-essential pesticides within the city of Peterborough.
What was the motivation for doing this?
Council was thinking that they want to move ahead to help make Peterborough a less toxic place to live. So that by preventing the use of pesticides and herbicides, that would be a step towards achieving that goal.
You wrote the bylaw, and there were a number of exceptions in there. What was the reason for those exceptions?
One of the exceptions was for golf courses.
Right.
And it was felt that golf courses locally are or will be, by the time the bylaw applies to the golf courses, have integrated pest management trained groundskeepers on staff, and that was felt to be adequate protection. The other exception I can think of is that we are not going to be regulating what it is that farmers do when they're engaged in the commercial production of food.
There are 6 exceptions to the new pesticide bylaw. The use of pesticides will be permitted in the following scenarios: in a public or private swimming pool, to purify water for human or animal use, and inside of a building. Pesticides may also be used on land for the commercial production of food, or to control, destroy, reduce, or repel, directly or indirectly, an animal, plant, or organism which is harmful to human health. Finally, the use of pesticides will be permitted on a golf course, provided that after March 1st, 2007, any such use or application is permitted only under the direction of an IPM-accredited groundskeeper.
We're very pleased to have as our guest Janet May. Welcome to Peterborough, Janet.
Thank you, Paul.
You are an expert in the pesticide bylaw situation.
Right.
How did you gain this position?
I originally worked for the Toronto Environmental Alliance in Toronto for over almost 15 years, and that's where I really started working towards getting a pesticide bylaw for the City of Toronto. And from there I've helped other communities, so I've worked with a lot of grassroots organizations and helped them to work towards bylaws and pesticide reduction policies in their municipalities.
What is your current position?
Right now I'm working for a group called the York Region Environmental Alliance, and we are doing organic lawn care workshops for the residents of York Region, which is the area just north of Toronto.
Right.
And we're just teaching people what they can do instead of using pesticides.
You obviously have a passion for this.
Mm-hmm.
What grew that passion?
I love gardening, and I have never used pesticides. It is entirely possible to have a beautiful, great looking lawn and garden without using any chemicals at all. And because I can do it, I like to teach other people how to do that. And certainly I'm not alone in this. There are lots of other people who have the same kind of philosophy. And so it's just something I love to do.
Achieving a natural, healthy-looking lawn can be very rewarding, but remember, it is a process. Be patient as nature takes its time. Do not be afraid to be creative. When it comes to your lawn and garden, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And remember, anybody can achieve a natural, vibrant lawn without using pesticides.
Janice, it's obvious to me that you're not only a very knowledgeable gardener, but you're something of a philosophical gardener. Just explain your philosophy about that.
Gardening is actually a very creative endeavor, and I like to think of it as you're producing a living landscape. You're not painting a landscape, right. You're producing a living landscape. And, you know, experiment with colors, experiment with different plants, talk to your neighbors, get cuttings from your neighbors. It's a good way to get to know your neighbors once you start gardening and sharing plants.
Who decides what is a weed and what is not a weed?
It's totally personal.
So beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
That's exactly right. If you like that creeping Charlie on your lawn, why shouldn't you have the creeping Charlie on your lawn? It does, after all, stay green in the drought of the summer.
And just behind you here in the Ecology Garden is a very good example, a yard of plenty.
Yes.
Now, what does that exactly entail?
Well, I think this incorporates growing vegetables too on your front garden. If you get full sun in your front yard, why shouldn't you grow some tomatoes?
Right.
Who says your tomatoes have to be in your backyard? And actually, I think that's something that we really should be looking at more.
Just on this, how did you develop this philosophy? Just by trial and error, by your own experience?
I think it's just being part of the social justice movement and, seeing all of the problems in the world and just thinking of a garden as a way to maybe solve a few problems.
This episode will feature straightforward techniques for caring for your lawn, which even I can understand. However, you may wish to have pen and paper at hand to take notes. Another obvious feature of maintaining a lawn is cutting it.
Yes.
And you will like this because we're here with a push mower.
Yes.
Are there any advantages to push mowers other than the obviously non-polluting things, but in terms of the lawn maintenance?
They actually do give a better cut. You usually get a sharper cut of the blades of grass, which is always very beneficial to a lawn. It's important whenever you do cut a lawn that the mower blades are sharp, because then you're cutting the grass, you're not tearing them. And when you tear the blades of grass, you open the plant up to disease and you just weaken it generally.
What, Janet, as well, is the optimum height to cut the grass?
Grass should be cut at about 3 to 3.5 inches in height. The reason for that is because, like all plants, grass is trying to create seeds for the next generation. And so whenever you cut a grass plant, you stress it out. And the energy of the plant goes from root development into seed creation again. So the less that you cut a grass plant, the better it is for root development. And we've been trying to emphasize that root development is really key to having a healthy lawn. And so keeping it higher is just better for the plant. The other advantage to having a higher height, a higher lawn shades out crabgrass. And crabgrass is one of those plants that needs full sun to germinate. And so when you're cutting your lawn higher, you can actually virtually eliminate crabgrass from your lawn in a single season.
When preparing to cut your lawn, the mowing deck should be set at 3 to 3.5 inches high. Longer grass blades will help shade out crabgrass and other weeds. Blades should be sharpened once every year. A sharper cut will help prevent disease in your grass. And remember, cutting less often will increase healthy root development.
Janet, what should one do with the lawn clippings?
Clippings should always be left on the ground where they fall. Clippings are a really valuable source of nutrients for the lawn. they provide about 30% of a lawn's nitrogen requirements over the season, and so you're giving yourself a free source of nitrogen just by leaving your clippings. Some people really worry that their clippings aren't going to biodegrade rapidly, but clippings that don't disintegrate after about 72 hours are actually an indication that your soil health is not very good, because a soil that is very healthy will actually work to biodegrade lawn clippings quickly, within 3 or 4 days. If the clippings aren't breaking down on your lawn, then it's an indication that you need to add some biological activity to the soil. And one of the best ways to do that is by adding compost, because of course compost contains worms, microorganisms, all the creatures that make a soil alive. And so by just putting down compost twice a year, about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch, you can start to add life back to your soil, and that will help the clippings to biodegrade. Another thing to be really aware of is to eliminate your use of synthetic fertilizers. Synthetic fertilizers are not very good for soil life. They tend to sterilize the soil, and so don't use synthetic fertilizers, and that will also help to bring your soil to a state where it makes clippings decompose very rapidly.
Clippings are a valuable source of nutrients and should be left on your lawn after cutting. Compost will add organic life to your lawn. Clippings and compost are preferred alternatives to synthetic fertilizers that will sterilize your soil.
Janet, now, I am faced with a number of weeds on the lawn. How do I get rid of them if I'm not using pesticides?
There is a new product out on the market called corn gluten meal. This is it. It's actually a byproduct of corn processing.
Yeah.
And a professor at Iowa State University discovered totally by accident that when you put this down, it will stop dandelion seeds from germinating, several other broadleaf weeds that are quite common on lawns. And so you apply this, in the Peterborough area you would apply it when the lilacs are in bud. So not when they're out in full bloom, but
right.
When you start to see the lilacs are going to be in bloom, you can put this down. And what it does is it will stop the seeds that have blown on your lawn from last year from germinating. This will not kill existing weeds, however. You
right.
do still have to get out the old weed digger and
yes.
dig them out by hand. Corn gluten meal too is also a very light nitrogen fertilizer. It's about 10% nitrogen.
Right.
And so when people put this on their lawns in the spring, they're also giving it a very mild fertilization, which is fine. The only thing you don't want to be doing in the spring with fertilizer is putting down a heavy nitrogen fertilizer, because that goes back to root development. When you put down too much nitrogen in the spring, you actually stop root development of your lawn and you get a lot of top growth, which is not a good situation.
Right.
We recommend that you put this down in the spring,
right.
and then you overseed later on in the season, late summer, early fall, to thicken up your lawn. So you're making sure that there's enough time in between the two applications.
Now, supposing you put some grass seed down in the fall,
right?
You'd still put this down in the spring?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Because you don't put down grass seed very late in the fall. You
right.
put it down in the early fall, late summer. And so that gives the grass seed plenty of time to germinate and establish itself before frost and before the snows come.
Corn gluten meal is a byproduct of corn processing that stops germination of seeds such as weed seeds and grass seeds. It will not, however, get rid of existing weeds. Apply corn gluten meal in late spring when lilacs are in bud. You must wait 6 weeks after applying corn gluten meal before reseeding your lawn. Practically Green will continue right after the break.
Janet, I have a multitude of grubs on a particular section of the lawn. What do I do?
Okay, there's actually a few things that you can do. One of them is you want to remove the conditions that are making it attractive for grubs to be on your lawn.
Right.
And grubs usually infest lawns that have weak, underdeveloped root systems. So that is key. You need to use organic lawn care practices to make sure that you have strong, healthy root systems. With a strong, healthy root system, it is very, very difficult for grubs to do any noticeable damage. If your problem is really bad, first of all, you need to make sure that, first of all, it is grubs that are infesting your lawn. And that second of all, you really do have a problem. And you know that you have a problem when the raccoons and the skunks are coming in the middle of the night and digging up your lawn, and there's no lawn left.
Because they're looking for the grubs.
Exactly. So they're doing you a favor. They're getting rid of the grubs, but you know, your lawn doesn't really look very good. So what you do is you score a 12 by 12 inch square in your lawn, and you pull back the turf, and you count the number of grubs that there are in the area. 15 to 20 grubs in a 12 by 12 patch is considered a problem. Typically you will find grubs at the end of a tree line. So if there's a tree on your property, just go to the place where the tree just the end of where it overhangs your lawn, score the patch, pull back the turf, and do a count. If you have a lot of grubs, there is a product called Lawn Guardian, which are nematodes.
Right.
And nematodes are parasites of grubs. They're little tiny microscopic insects. You won't be able to see them at all. And what they do is they make their way into the grubs, and they live in the grubs until the grubs die. This product is a biological product. It's found in the fridge section of nurseries. And it's in a sponge. And what you have to do is you have to dip the sponge in water, and I believe it's about a gallon of water. The box will tell you. And then you have your concentrate, and then you mix that concentrate with more water and apply it to your lawn. And before you apply this, you should make sure that your lawn is well watered so that the soil is moist. And nematodes will take care of grub damage.
Now you said that 12 to 15 grubs are a problem in that.
Right.
What is an acceptable level?
If you see a couple, you don't really have a problem. Most gardeners know very well that when they're digging around in their perennial bed, they'll often find grubs. And those grubs are doing absolutely no damage to the perennials. It's okay to just let them sit there and do their thing. Grubs are the larvae of June beetles, and we need June beetles in our ecosystem. So, you know, it doesn't make sense to do a wholesale slaughter of a creature that belongs here.
Grubs are a natural part of the ecosystem, but too many can be a problem. To check for grubs, score off a 12 by 12 inch area at the edge of your tree line. 15 to 20 grubs in an area that size is higher than normal. Products such as Lawn Guardian, which contains nematodes, will help solve your grub problem. To properly apply this product, first place the sponge containing nematodes in warm water and let soak for half an hour to an hour. Be sure to mix often. When the solution is ready to be applied to your lawn, pour 1 cup of the nematode solution into your watering can. Then fill the can with more warm water. Spread the mixture evenly over the affected area of your lawn. Nematodes require lots of water, so be sure to water any areas of the lawn where nematodes have been applied. Nematodes should be kept in the refrigerator until you are ready to use them. The best time of year to apply nematodes is roughly mid-June. Because nematodes require lots of water, they should be applied during or just prior to a rainfall. And remember, do not apply nematodes to your lawn if you have been or will be using pesticides.
Janet, here we are in what is obviously a very attractive garden with a select portion of it as a lawn. But that lawn obviously is vibrant, healthy, and has a good root structure. Why is that particularly?
One of the most important components of organic lawn care is proper watering.
Right.
And people often fail to water their lawns adequately. A lawn in this climate needs about 1 inch of water a week. That's it. So watering every day, every other day is not only usually going against city policy, which says
right.
don't water every
Right.
day, but it's also very bad for your lawn. One of the most important components of having a healthy lawn is having a healthy root system.
Right.
When you water properly, you're developing a long, healthy root system that goes deep into the ground. And the root system is so thick and it's so long that it's able to search deep down into the soil and find the water that is down there. When you water too frequently, when you don't water long enough, what happens is that the root system becomes stunted and underdeveloped, and the roots just become very lazy and stay very close to the surface of the soil. I like to think of it as, you know, when your kids lie around on the couch and ask you to go get them a drink from the fridge.
Yes.
If you keep getting them drinks, they'll never know where the fridge is. Well, the root system of a lawn is exactly the same.
Right.
If you keep watering it all the time, the roots just lie there close to the surface being very lazy, and they don't know to go deep into the soil to find the water. Now, there are a couple of ways that you can figure out whether or not your lawn has enough water or not. One of them is what's called a gauge, a rain gauge, a water gauge, and these are available at a nominal cost from Peterborough Green Up. Or you can use a tuna can. And what you do is you just take the top off the tuna can, or you put this down beside your sprinkler, and you wait until it's filled up. And when the water reaches this line, you've got an inch of water, and you know that you can stop watering. If the tuna can fills up, that's approximately an inch in height, and you know that you have enough water.
Okay. Well, I've learnt from that watering is the key to a vibrant lawn.
Yes. Now, the other thing to remember about watering too is the time of day is very important for watering. It is much better to water your lawn early in the morning, because if you water later on in the day in the summer, the heat of the sun will make the water evaporate. And when you water in the evening, you're creating conditions that are very hospitable for lawn disease. So it's much better to water in the morning.
Watering is key to maintaining a vibrant, healthy-looking lawn. Watering your lawn early in the morning is most effective. 1 inch per week is all that is required. A rain gauge or tuna can be used to measure the appropriate amount. And remember, proper watering habits lead to a strong root structure and ultimately a healthy lawn.
Janet, we've been talking about if you've tried your best efforts, but the grass has simply not grown. And I think we have an example here of what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Do you care to explain that?
This is a great example of a situation where grass is not likely to grow very well because we have shade coming from the evergreens, so the soil is probably very acidic. And so what this homeowner has done is they've planted ferns, they've planted hostas, I can see a trillium over there. So what they've done is they've found plants that will do well in an acidic, shady situation, and they've just stopped beating their head against the brick wall, and they've given up on the grass, which is a great idea.
Hey presto, there you have.
Yep,
that
just a beautiful example of how you can get really creative with your garden.
Now, Janet, behind us we have a variety of plants and flowers that are native to this particular region. What is the advantage of having them in your garden?
They tend not to require as much maintenance as do exotic plants that grow naturally in another part of the world. And so plants such as this giant sunflower, there's Culver's root, there's black-eyed Susans, have adapted to the soil and the climate of this region. And so if we get a late frost, it tends not to have an impact on them. If we get an early frost, they just roll with the punches of Mother Nature. And so we don't need to be using pesticides on them or other chemicals to make them thrive. The other advantage, of course, is that they attract, as you can see, bees and butterflies, birds. And so it really creates an ecosystem that it allows all species to thrive and live together. And that is always really beneficial for fighting pests.
We hope that you have learned some fairly straightforward techniques for caring in an environmentally friendly way for your lawn during the growing season. Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope we'll see you in the future.